This is Occupy Maine TV on Portland's Community Television Network.
Hi, I'm Brian Leonard.
I'm Bob Klotz.
And I'm Regis Tremblay. In this edition of the show, Brian Leonard and Holly Seeliger will bring you another segment of In the News. Bob Klotz will consider a variety of issues related to the Occupy movement and our environment, particularly related to the ongoing tar sands pipeline issue, including how it directly impacts us here in Maine. And I will continue my exposure of ALEC, that shadowy right-wing organization hell-bent on influencing our state legislature with legislation favorable to corporate greed and reducing our voice in elections. Occupy Maine TV is a new and innovative example of citizen journalism using the power of television and the internet to educate 99% of Americans whose rights and freedoms are being trampled on by what I call the axis of evil. The insidious, unholy marriage between Congress, corporations, Wall Street, and the Supreme Court. It is our job to bring you the news and information that the corporate-owned mainstream media cannot and will not bring you. And now, here's Brian and Holly with the news.
Hi, I'm Brian Leonard here with Holly Seeliger, and this is the news of the people, for the people, and by the people. We are not sponsored by or brought to you by anything but our dying First Amendment right. First and foremost, we at Occupy Maine TV want to send our support to Diane Messer. She is one of 9 people being persecuted in court today for practicing their First Amendment rights. The persecution began this morning while we were in the studio taping the show. And yes, I did say persecuted because, as you know, one cannot be prosecuted for practicing their rights. It would be like being prosecuted for, say, attending school or casting a vote. Diane, along with 8 others, will be defending their rights, considered by some to be long lost, and others who feel that, at the very least, are being slowly and willfully ground away. We would love to hear your thoughts on this as we continue to be persecuted by our illegitimate government. Diane is on our hearts and minds this morning. Thank you, Diane. Holly?
Scores of Occupy Wall Street protesters were arrested on Saturday, March 17th, as police officers swept Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan and closed the park with barricades. The arrests occurred after hundreds of people gathered in the financial district in New York City to observe the founding of Occupy Wall Street, which began on September 17th. Earlier in the day, protesters marched through New York City, where they were followed by police officers on foot and scooters, who at one point blocked access to Wall Street and made initial arrests of about a dozen people near the park. By 11:30 p.m., police officers massed on Zuccotti Park, and a commander announced that the park was closed. The park has been obliged through an agreement with the city to remain open. The commander then announced that anyone who remained inside would be arrested and charged with trespassing. Dozens of demonstrators sat down and locked arms as officers moved in at about 11:30 p.m. and police began pulling people from the crowd and leading them out of the park in handcuffs. At one point, a woman appeared to be suffering from seizures, flopped on the ground in handcuffs as bystanders shouted for the police to remove the cuffs and provide medical attention. By midnight, a line of officers pushed against some of the remaining protesters, forcing them south on Broadway, at times hitting people with batons and shoving people to the ground. After clearing the park, police officers and private security guards placed a ring of metal barricades on the park's perimeter, as those who had been arrested were placed inside a city bus. Protesters have returned to Wall Street this week. One man is seen here being brutally slammed headfirst into a heavy glass door. Look at the space inside the window pane at about waist height.
Just smashing me against the floor.
This week, Maine has earned an F rating from a National Organization Assessment of Accountability and Transparency. Maine ranked 46th in the integrity investigation by 3 nonpartisan national and international journalism, and good government groups. The Center for Public Integrity, Public Radio International, and Global Integrity based their scores on research containing 330 indicators of the laws and practices, all within 14 categories. These categories range from procurement to campaign disclosure to lobbying. Maine was one of the 8 states to get a failing grade. The others are North Dakota, Michigan, South Carolina, Virginia, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Georgia. Maine got an F in 9 of 14 categories, including executive accountability, in part because no agency oversees the ethics of top-level state officials, from the government to department heads, or from the Attorney General to the state auditor. A leader of the study said, "A low score means Maine lacks the laws, regulation, and enforcement to ensure residents are getting the performance they hope to see from state government." Maine also got Fs in public access to information, civil service management, pension fund management, the Insurance Commission, legislative accountability, lobbying disclosure, ethics enforcement, and redistricting. Holly?
It's also one of 11 states which does not have an independent agency that regulates the professional ethics of the executive branch of government. That means problems, including possible conflicts of interest, can fall through the cracks. Maine has no revolving door law covering top state officials moving to and from the private industries they had once regulated. The financial disclosure requirements for constitutional officers, legislators, and executive branch employees do not provide any real meaningful information, as they list only income and not their full range of assets. The people of Maine still have no way to determine if an official became wealthy while in office or the extent of conflicts between their private interests and public responsibilities. That means the value of their homes and investments, properties, for example, are not disclosed, nor is their stake in any business. Also, the disclosure forms require virtually no details on investments. Only members of the Appropriations Committee are able to spend the time to understand the budget. In addition, many budget decisions recently have been made in closed political party caucuses. Within 1 year into the 4-year term of Republican Governor LePage, it appears he is less answerable to the public through the State House press than recent governors. Governor LePage has no regularly scheduled news conference or availability. However, Mainers shouldn't worry. Not a single state in the Union received a grade of an A. So if you put the status quo on the bell curve, Maine really received an E.
March 17th, the New York Times published an editorial on the continued bailout of our banking system, which is worth repeating here. Last week was a big one for the banks. On Monday, the foreclosure settlement between the big banks and federal and state officials was filed in federal court and is now awaiting a judge's all but certain approval. On Tuesday, the Federal Reserve announced that the much anticipated results of the latest round of bank stress tests. The banks did fantastic and far better than homeowners and American taxpayers. That is not only unfair, given banks' huge culpability in the mortgage bubble and financial meltdown. It also means that homeowners and the economy still need more relief, and that the banks, without more meaningful punishment, will not be deterred from the next round of misbehavior. Under the terms of the settlement, the banks will provide $26 billion worth of relief to borrowers and aid to the states for the anti-foreclosure efforts. They will get immunity from government civil lawsuits for a litany of alleged abuses, including wrongful denial of loan modifications and wrongful foreclosures. That $26 billion is paltry compared to the scale of wrongdoing and ensuing damage, including 4 million homeowners who have lost their homes, 3.3 million others who are in or near foreclosure, and more than 11 million borrowers who are underwater by $700 billion.
President Obama is scheduled to visit the Portland Museum of Art on March 30th for a fundraising dinner. The cost of attending the dinner at the Art Museum ranges from $5,000 to $30,000 to the Democratic National Committee. The dinner will follow a reception that afternoon at Southern Maine Community College in South Portland, where about 1,000 people are expected to attend. In related news, Occupy Maine will host a free Friends of Occupy event on March 30th during Obama's visit to Portland. The events will include a free art gallery, food, music, fire performers, and more. For more information and how you can get involved, please contact Occupy Maine at occupymaine@gmail.com.
That is the news this week. We hope to see you in Monument Square on Friday.
Hi, I'm Bob Klotz from Occupy Maine, reporting on our environment. Excuse me while I take a deep breath. It's really been a busy couple of weeks, and there's a lot to consider, so you might want to be ready to take some notes and use the pause button during this episode. I've considered changing my name to Chicken Little, except in my version of the story, the sky literally is falling, as is sanity. 80 degrees in March somehow gets defined as good weather, when it's actually additional evidence that climate change is happening now. Last year, infestations of many pests were related to a longer warm period in the state of Maine, in light of similar early spring weather and later fall, early winter cooling. The ecosystem actually protects us with winter. The suppression of many plant, insect, infectious, and other dangers is critical to protecting our health. This is the nature of nature. With high pollen counts in the mid-Atlantic states in February, unheard of temperatures, a lack of snowpack, increased threat of fires, and a host of other active climate change realities, it's clear that we're in jeopardy of significant environmentally related health issues in the coming months and years. At a time when the LePage administration continues to assault the social safety net, such things are yet another factor in the reality of Mainers literally suffering and dying needlessly. When 14,000 people died in France in 2003, related to an unprecedented heat wave, climate-denying conservative pundits in this country suggested that the lesson that they should have learned was to get air conditioning and build more Walmarts. Frankly, I think such denial and callousness in the face of scientific fact should be viewed as a criminal act. Given reality, we should apply a climate change fee on everyone. When it's literally too hot to live comfortably, the funds could be used to gain some relief for those of us who are still alive who voiced these concerns and who've done something about it. And what of the deniers? Jail would probably be too comfortable. And it's pretty clear that they would have continued to vote against their own best interest, probably arguing to give the funds to the failed oil companies. In many ways, it does seem that paradise is lost. On a recent trip, I was shocked to see how much garbage existed on what should be a pristine beach. The fact that this is in any way acceptable is probably the most disturbing thing about what we have come to. Even when faced with the evidence of the impact of our highly consumptive, destructive, and disposable ways, it's somehow okay and denied. Back home here in Maine, there's been notable activity at the State House, both in support of and in opposition to our environment and our people. As an attempt at a feeble summary, let me be clear that there are many forces that are committed to working together to fundamentally change the way life should be in Maine and to destroy our environment. Stay with me on this. I realize that some of the terms and issues make my eyes glaze over. Why they don't call it poison flowing through your backyard versus tar sands oil is beyond me. Here they are, all in a rush. East-West Highway, Enbridge Pipeline, the Searsport LPG tank project, and ALEC. And that's pretty much how they are moving it through the legislature, the governor's office, and our oversight agencies in a rush. With the second session of the 125th legislature due to close up shop in April, the push is on. Consider, significant concerns remain regarding the risk of the Enbridge pipeline bringing Western Canadian tar sands oil through Maine and into Portland. Tar sands oil is one of the dirtiest fossil fuels on the planet. Its acquisition, production, transportation, and usage are incredibly damaging to our environment. The powers that are intent on such destruction are not going away. Like a bully called on their behaviors, they're not going to suddenly say, "Oh, you're right, I'm a sociopath." They are in this for the long haul, and we need to be as well. Interestingly, there's strong evidence that the Chinbro-supported East-West Highway would be developed in association with the pipeline. Do not be fooled that this is going to make your trip to Vermont go easier. This highway has nothing to do with anything but corporate interest dissecting the state and destroying incredibly scenic areas for their profit. And all evidence suggests that the primary beneficiary of this highway would be Canadian exporters. Additional evidence links the creation of this transportation and energy super corridor to the development of an LPG tank project in Searsport, With that construction, yet another example of elected officials having sold out to corporate interest. And then there's ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. As reported by Regis Tremblay, this not-so-shadowy instrument of the largest corporations in America has enormous influence in the state of Maine and with these interconnected environmental issues. Crafting legislation that serves the interest of corporations over people, ALEC boasts that 1 in every 5 of their bills are enacted into law. And so it goes. As of today, the East-West Highway has received support via the State Senate and the House to receive $300,000 worth of funding for a feasibility study, with funds coming from the state of Maine. And this is just the most recent pursuit of the study, with the recurrent effort through decades denied up until now. This is corporate welfare at its most apparent, at the same time that the safety net is being shredded. Where is the outrage and where are our elected officials? Here's some more. John Courtney, the Republican Majority Leader of the Senate from York, has developed a resolution to support the Keystone XL pipeline, in effect further greasing the political skids for support of the Enbridge pipeline through Maine. All of this should be further considered in the larger context of the incredible movement to strip even more of the natural resources of this state for corporate gain, including the North Woods and the dismantling of Lurk, the grab for our water resources, and efforts to ensure that Maine becomes the way life was. There's also movement to increase out-of-state toxic and other waste coming into Maine, specifically at the Norridgewock dump, and the consideration of a major rewrite to mining rules, allowing for direct in-state mountaintop removal versus the indirect that we now have because we use Appalachian coal for our electricity in Maine largely. Maine is clearly open for business. Like the runt of the litter, it's as if those who should be looking out for our best interest have literally rolled over top of us. And I'm pissed, and you should be too. We literally cannot afford this on so many levels. But those of you care know what needs to be done. Unfortunately, that means we have to work as hard or harder than the forces against us. In the words of Bill McKibben, we have to organize, organize, organize. Though there is the tendency and the necessity to take on these individual issues, we have to maintain the larger view and take things on at that level. This is a fundamentally corrupt and intentionally integrated assault on a massive scale, destroying the most basic aspects of our state, our country, and our environment. This is what the Occupy process is all about, and it is critical that we continue to work together to find ways to effectively respond to these realities. Please stay in touch with like-minded environmentally supportive friends, families, organizations, and other entities, including me. Also stay engaged with those who are consciously and unconsciously committed to destroying our environment, and use all of your skills to stay effectively committed to change. Do what you can in your own life to support our environment, and then a bit more. Contact your elected representatives and let them know your position and expectation around these issues, and remind them that you vote and you are very aware of the upcoming elections. And take part in the numerous upcoming activities that support our environment. Consider, on April 5th, the Natural Resources Council of Maine will be holding a seminar at Bowdoin College regarding mountaintop removal in Appalachia, with obvious considerations of issues here in Maine. In honor of Earth Day, the Hope Festival in Bangor will be taking place on Saturday, the 21st of April, with keynote speaker Bill McKibben of 350.org. And on April 22nd, Mensk and the city of Portland will hold their Urban Earth Day events. I hope to see you at these events, and would love to hear about events that you are aware of in support of our environment. Also, consider this link to a critical petition encouraging Congress to end all subsidies to fossil fuel companies and to invest in green jobs and clean energy. And be sure to keep May 5th open for a Connect the Dots event regarding real and current climate change. More details on this in the future. Stay cool and be in touch.
This is the second in a series exposing ALEC's influence and activity here in Maine. In the first segment, on show number 6, I explained how and what ALEC has been doing here and nationally to advance the agenda of the super rich and the multinational corporations. By incredible infusions of cash to influence elections, and by developing model legislation for Congress and state governments, ALEC has been involved in an all-out assault on the 99% to cancel our vote and deprive us of our First Amendment rights. In this segment, I will reveal how ALEC has succeeded in taking over all three elected branches of government: the governorship, the Senate, and the House. Through ALEC, behind closed doors, corporations hand state legislatures the changes to the law they desire that directly benefit their bottom line. Along with legislators, corporations have membership in ALEC. Corporations and legislators sit on all 9 ALEC task forces and vote to approve model bills. They have their own corporate governing board, which meets jointly with the legislative board. They fund almost all of ALEC's operation. Participating legislators, overwhelmingly conservative Republicans, then bring those proposals home and introduce them in state houses across the land as their own brilliant ideas and important public policy innovations, without disclosing that corporations crafted and voted on the bill. Now here's how it works here in Maine. Once in office, LePage has been ramming ALEC bills through our Republican-controlled legislature. But Governor LePage couldn't do it all on his own. Once in office, he hired several corporate lobbyists to head important agencies. One example, Mary Mayhew, a corporate lobbyist with no government management experience, was appointed to head the state's largest and most troubled agency, DHHS. Prior to her appointment as commissioner of DHHS, Mayhew was hired from the lobbying firm of Hawks and Mayhew as his senior policy advisor on, are you ready for this? Healthcare issues focused on Medicare policy, Department of Health and Human Services policies and finance, and state and federal healthcare issues. And what is so incredible about this is that she has zero experience in any of these fields. Nada, niente, zippo. Her only management experience was as the State of Maine Government Relations Manager for Equifax Corporation, a Georgia corporation that provides credit history and analysis for businesses. A lobbyist for a large corporation. LePage also hired Ann Robinson as a senior policy advisor, a position she holds while simultaneously working as a full-time lobbyist for Pretty Flaherty, Beliveau, and Pachios, one of the largest law firms in Maine. The firm's lobbyists represent corporate and big money interests in the legislature. And here's the kicker. Robinson just happens to be Maine's corporate chair for ALEC. Connect the dots. The billionaire Koch brothers, major funders of ALEC, and multinational corporations where Robinson and LePage get their legislative agenda. And the firm's explanation for Robinson's role in ALEC is hilarious.
More than once, several of us within Occupy, we have been called and told that Ann Robinson does this on her own time, that she's not paid by Pretty Flaherty when she's representing ALEC.
As the governor's senior advisor, Robinson and ALEC wrote the governor's rollback of state regulations for health, environmental protection, and safety. And so I ask you, does this seem right and above board? Isn't it clear that big money and multinational corporations are behind all of this? The medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex, the corporate desires to be unregulated so they can steal our resources and destroy the environment in the name of greed and larger profits. But LePage and Robinson couldn't do this on their own. They needed the support of the Republican-controlled legislature, and that all starts with Maine's ALEC legislator, Senator Richard Rosen, a Republican from Bucksport. Robinson's ALEC's state co-chair, and the following Republican legislators who are ALEC's Maine's representatives.
The senators who are affiliated with ALEC in leadership roles are Richard Rosen of the 31st District, Doug Smith of the 27th District, Deborah Plowman of the 33rd District, Brian Langley of the 28th District, Chris Rector of the 22nd District, Mike Thibodeau of the 23rd District, and former Senator Carol Weston of the 23rd District, who was the former chair of ALEC in Maine.
It works like this. Robinson, Rosen, and their gang attend ALEC's annual meetings, expenses paid for by us, where they, along with ALEC's multinational corporate board members, listen to model legislation to bring back to their individual states. Bingo! LePage, Robinson, and your hometown representatives didn't cook this stuff up by themselves. It all comes from ALEC, which has been operating in the shadows since it was funded by Paul Weyrich, that right-wing radical activist who in 1992 founded ALEC. Here's the clip I shared in the first segment on ALEC that unveils the real mission and goal of Weyrich, the super rich, and the multinationals.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
There are only two things that will stop these criminals and enemies of the state. First, be sure to vote. If we hand over the keys to the White House and the State House to these people, they will finish off the middle class and completely destroy our democracy. Second, we've got to come out in droves to protest these attacks on our democracy and our constitutional rights. It isn't enough for 8 to 10 of us to make signs and protest at the Capitol. Don't you think if 1,000 Mainers showed up at the State House for a day of peaceful protest where our politicians could see us, that they wouldn't get the message? Maine doesn't have a constitutional provision to recall the governor and legislators, but our Constitution is unique in that it guarantees us the unalienable and indefeasible right to institute government and to alter, reform, and totally change the same when safety and happiness require it. Article 1, Section 2 of the Maine State Constitution. I think it's time we change our government because our safety and happiness requires it. Well, that's it for this edition of Occupy Maine TV. Thanks for watching, and please pass it on by posting it on Facebook and sending the link to your friends and acquaintances.